A very good morning to all of you, uh, distinguished guests, colleagues, friends. We are very privileged here to have I'm very privileged to moderate this particular session. The Coast Guard is the front line of the dynamics and dilemmas that we have been speaking about for the last day or so. And for the first time, as the DAV has mentioned, we have brought them together in a session for them to give us a sense of their own role in fostering cooperation in the South China Sea. I won't take up too much of their time because the real value is listening to them. There's a slight change in the order of the proceedings, so bear with me. Our first speaker will be Dr. J. Tristan Tariella, Commander of the Maritime Security Affairs from Philippines, followed by Mr. Tatsuhiko Takashima, Vice Admiral, Maritime Self-Defense Force, Japan, then Bakamla Hudiasha is Nural, Deputy Director International Law and Legislation from Indonesia, and finally Senior Colonel Nguyen Kat Wood, Director of Military Science Division, Vietnam Coast Guard. Without further ado, may I give the floor to Dr. J. Tristan Tariella, who is joining us online. Immediately after this, he has to leave for pressing matters, so I will give the audience also a chance to have a lightning round if they have any questions for him. Dr. J, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I would like to extend my gratitude to the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam for extending an invitation to me. However, I must express my sincere apologies for not being able to join you in Hanoi. Before I proceed with my presentation, I would like to emphasize that the views that I'll be presenting are solely based on my academic research and do not represent the official position of the Philippine government, particularly the Philippine Coast Guard and the National Task Force West Philippine Sea. As a scholar, I stand before you today, separate from my role as a Coast Guard officer. To contribute directly to the panel discussion, I would like to address the three guide questions mentioned in the panel's descriptive background. However, I will begin by addressing the question of how Coast Guards can be utilized for cooperation and peace in the South China Sea. As you all know, Coast Guards can play a crucial role in promoting cooperation and maintaining peace in the South China Sea, since it has mutual roles that largely affect the established maritime order, particularly in ensuring maritime safety, protecting the marine environment, and enforcing maritime laws. By leveraging these capabilities and expertise of Coast Guards, nations can promote stability, enhance security, and foster peaceful resolutions in the region. It is worth mentioning that the Coast Guard is not a new maritime organization. The birth of the Coast Guard goes way back during the early days of the United States state building as a revenue collector and during the commencement of international merchant shipping in Europe for the safety of life and property at sea. The Coast Guard's genesis can be traced back to the U.S. Coast Guard's history and Her Majesty's Coast Guard. Both of these maritime agencies are proof that it coexisted with the Navy but performed completely different mandates. Throughout the years, its mere role of tax collector and lifesaver had metamorphosed to a maritime constabulary unit that carries out the protection of the marine environment and enforcement of maritime laws. In other words, the Coast Guard had emerged as an agency different from that of the Navy that does not supplant the latter's territorial defense roles. This was the Coast Guard's origin, an agency that institutionalized its roles in maritime safety, maritime law enforcement, and marine environmental protection. Both the respective Coast Guards have safeguarded the national interest by initially ensuring that smuggling activities are entirely halted and that the custom obligations are practically settled. These two maritime forces' roles have evolved as time passed, with diverse missions that they perform all along as a significant partner for their respective navies during wartime. Their development from customs revenue collector to a naval sidekick has not overshadowed their most crucial role in saving lives, ensuring safety at sea, and protecting the marine environment. Secondly, the Coast Guard template that the United States and the United Kingdom long established has been adopted in the region to address domestic concerns, particularly in effective maritime governance. As seen from Japan and the Philippines, the United States created the Coast Guard to address a wide range of issues, from lighthouse building to preventing illegal immigrants. Its practicality and flexibility to be used in improving maritime governance were also the reason why this was created in Malaysia and also in Vietnam. The traditional Coast Guard roles institutionalized in the United States had been diffused and molded to fit the demand of these countries in the region. Furthermore, the setting that the U.S. Coast Guard was not placed temporary coast guards for Japan, the Philippines, Malaysia, and even Vietnam. Third, the Coast Guard's utilization in patrolling the disputed waters became a turning point for its evolution from a mere agency that ensures the safety of life and property at sea, protect the marine environment, and enforces maritime laws. The inclusion of maritime security among its role, particularly in patrolling the disputed waters, looks like a departure from its original mission. The Coast Guards in the region embrace this particular role since they recognize that the White Hull ship is a solution to prevent the militarization of the dispute and at the same time ease the tension among the claimant states. Although this new role propelled the Coast Guard's development in the region, this somehow distorted its traditional identity. Lastly, besides the evolution of the Coast Guard functions throughout the years, it showed that states have a varying appreciation of employing the maritime agency. Initially, the Coast Guard establishment and development's main objective is only related to addressing domestic concerns, mainly those related to maritime constabulary functions. However, over the years, the states have also used the Coast Guard in engaging the region for cooperation in addressing mutual interests, particularly in addressing non-traditional security threats like piracy, smuggling, and even drug trafficking. The Coast Guard utilization in patrolling the contested waters has once again changed the state's appreciation to this agency. The Coast Guard's flexible and adaptable identity has allowed the states to perceive it as an agency that could best fit its interests, whether domestically or even externally. Beyond advancing each other's territorial interests in the South China Sea, Coast Guard cooperation is valuable in addressing non-traditional security threats, promoting rules-based governance, and ensuring Southeast Asia's waterways are safe and secure. Therefore, Coast Guard have critical functions that could provide more avenues for regional cooperation. In this premise that I have used in responding to the first question, I would like to respond now to the first two questions about the role of Coast Guard, whether it stabilizes or destabilizes the maritime domain, as well as their impact on the elimination or broadening the gray zone. The role of Coast Guard organization in the region have evolved beyond their traditional functions, how encompassing patrolling contested waters is. This expansion of responsibilities has sparked debates among scholars who argue that Coast Guards are blurring the line between defense and constabulary roles, entering what is known as the gray zone area. Initially established to perform maritime constabulary duties and promote cooperation, these Coast Guard organizations are now seen as gray zone strategies employed by states to assert territorial claims. This situation is further complicated by the establishment and utilization of the China Coast Guard. The China Coast Guard presence has distorted the identity of Coast Guards and led maritime security scholars to view them differently. Instead of perceiving them as a fulfilling maritime security roles, Coast Guards are now seen as deceptive smoke screens used to advance territorial claims with less emphasis on those traditional functions that I mentioned earlier. The attention and dominance of the China Coast Guard in the South China and East China Seas have led to a generalization that Coast Guard developments in the region solely reflect gray zone strategies and disregarded their other traditional significant roles. The behavior of the China Coast Guard at sea during patrols has worsened the overall image of Coast Guard. Rather than being seen as a potential de-escalation approach, the China Coast Guard actions have raised concerns that Coast Guard competitions could escalate conflicts in the South China Sea. This tainted the narrative that undermines the intent of deploying Coast Guards to reduce tensions. It is important to note that while China Coast Guard has dominating presence in the South China Sea, it does not represent all Coast Guards in the region. Many Coast Guard organizations continue to fulfill their traditional roles and contribute to maritime governance, the safety and environmental protection. However, the prominence of the China Coast Guard and its actions have overshadowed these contributions in the discourse surrounding Coast Guard development in the region. Taking lessons from the 2012 Scarborough Shoal standoff, the Chinese government took measures to consolidate its maritime administrative agencies, referred to as the Five Dragons steering up the sea, and established the China Coast Guard. This is a time that the maritime scholars argued that this move was also aimed at asserting China's sovereignty over the contested areas in the South China Sea and the East China Sea, bringing them under its domestic laws. Interestingly, since its inception, the China Coast Guard has primarily relied on its white-hulled vessels to conduct patrols in the disputed waters. These China Coast Guard ships have accompanied Chinese fishing vessels or Chinese maritime militia and have become more assertive in upholding China's sovereignty against claimants from Southeast Asian countries. These China Coast Guard have denied entry to Southeast Asian nations into contested areas like Scarborough Shoal and even the Paracel Islands. By employing the China Coast Guard for patrolling the South China Sea, Beijing has sought to counter accusations of militarization in the region's sea dispute. However, many scholars argue that the creation of the China Coast Guard serves as a mere facade, concealing China's true intention of de-escalation or non-provocation. Although China Coast Guard white ships may appear to be ordinary law enforcement vessels, they possess lethal capabilities that contradict the traditional role of Coast Guard. It is worth noting that a significant number of China Coast Guard vessels are refurbished naval frigates, previously decommissioned by the People's Liberation Army Navy with their naval armaments intact. The gray zone tactic that most scholars claim in explaining the Coast Guard development fully applies to understanding China Coast Guard's growth. The China Coast Guard's formation, separate from the State Oceanic Administration, reveals its true purpose. It is contrary to the traditional Coast Guard roles focused on maritime safety, marine environmental protection, and maritime law enforcement. Therefore, the rise of the White House among the Southeast Asian countries is a positive development since it strengthens the maritime order to ascertain that the sea trade routes that affect the global economy is safe, the marine environment is protected, the nefarious activities are suppressed, and that the territorial disputes are de-escalated if we're only going to talk about the Southeast Asian countries creating their own Coast Guard. However, it is very significant to mention that China Coast Guard does not align with the prevailing regional Coast Guard norm that Japan, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, and even the South Asian Coast Guards is supporting. China Coast Guard is the only Coast Guard in Asia that puts the white painted hulls of the Coast Guards in the gray zone. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you very much, Dr. J, for that overview, which sets the scene for the discussions. If you don't mind, you can stay online. I will take one round of questions from the floor so that you can address some of the points raised in your presentation. The floor is now open. Is there anybody that has questions? Yes, please. Please identify yourself and make it short.
Terima kasih, Your Honorable Excellency, for this opportunity. My name is Jifaya. I'm from Indonesia, one of the young leaders present in this conference. To Commodore J, it is true the fact that white-hulled vessels are truly former corvettes, as we can see. However, what I want to ask is, are there any prevailing regimes that determine whether or not a vessel should be Coast Guard? Because I noticed that there is a wide variety of Coast Guard specifications. First, we have from the Philippines, Indonesia. It is 120-meter length and to 4 meters length and rubber fast boats. So These coast guards from Indonesia and Philippines are mostly armed with R40mm cannons to 25mm Bushmaster's cannons. To US colors, we have US Coast Guard colors armed with 25mm Bushmasters. To the fact that there are former corvettes in the South China Sea armed with 76mm autocannons and missiles still armed to the teeth but painted in white as Coast Guard. What is your view on these varieties, wide varieties of Coast Guard? And should there be a regime on Coast Guard's classifications, considering that there are wide varieties from lethal to non-lethal weaponry on the Coast Guard vessels? Because again, as you say, Coast Guards are supposed to guard maritime security and supposed to be one of the supporting arms of a state in securing their territory other than the Navy. Thank you.
Terima kasih. I would take one or two more other questions and then let Dr. J respond to it. Yes, please.
My name is Marie Hebert. I wanted to ask, sort of, you said that China's Coast Guard is doing basically doing military naval maneuvers in the disputed territories, but that the Japan, ASEAN, etc., are still following the traditional role of the Coast Guard. Do you see that China's ramping up the role of the Coast Guard could cause Coast Guards in these other countries to follow suit in response to repel China? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I have one last question before I let Dr. J handle it? Yes, please.
Thank you. Good morning. Andre from the ICRC. Just one question, and that is the risks of escalation of incidents between states. Obviously, on the extreme spectrum, might involve crossing the threshold of an armed conflict. So my question is, what is done or is something done to actively think of status of Coast Guard vessels, if they are civilian vessels, whether they are protected, and what Coast Guard should do to ensure that it's that their status is very clear and do not engage in any activities that might render them military objectives. Obviously, this is a not linked to a specific situation. It's just a general question in terms of preparedness and thinking about the use of Coast Guards. If there's any reaction on that, thank you.
Thank you very much for those three really good questions. Dr. J, may I turn the floor over to you?
Thank you for your very interesting questions. For me to respond to the first question, I think there's really, I mean, that's true. I agree with you. There are different variation of Coast Guard vessels that belong to various inventories, whether in the Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Malaysia. So to the question, is there really a need now for us to have at least an agreed setting of defining what will be the armaments, what will be the characteristic of the vessel? That would be a great idea, but let me first stress out, based on my presentation, that the regional coast guards among Southeast Asian countries, we have this something like agreed regional norm that our coast guards are not really intended for us to have a much more bigger vessels or much more powerful naval armament, just like with the Navy. We all agree that the traditional Coast Guard functions, particularly BACAMLA, MMBA, Vietnam Coast Guard, and even the Philippine Coast Guard, is more on to support maritime governance, wherein it's only limited to maritime law enforcement and then establishing cooperation for maritime safety and also in preventing the marine environment, protecting the marine environment, and enforcing maritime laws. Now, for the second question, will there be an influence from China as it build on more on bigger Coast Guard vessels and deploy also much more number of Coast Guard vessels? I would argue that it has really influenced now the countries among the claimant states in the South China Sea. The Philippines has been building up its Coast Guard fleet. You can also see that from Vietnam, also Malaysia, and even BACAMLA of Indonesia. All of us are building our own Coast Guard in a way that we can counter-respond with the presence of the China Coast Guard. But to that, related also to the third question, will the increased number of Coast Guard vessels will eventually trigger a much more bigger armed conflict? I don't think so. I still have this belief that Coast Guards among the region, particularly here in Southeast Asia, we have this kind of professional understanding among Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Philippines that we're not going to be that aggressive or aggressive to each other in a way that will be the cause of the conflict. We can see that from how Malaysian Coast Guard, Vietnam Coast Guard, and even Philippine Coast Guard passes through each other in the South China Sea. We don't provoke each other. We have our own respect in those territories that we are currently occupying, that we are all patrolling. I think our friend from Bakamla will also be able to strengthen this answer that I'm giving now. We have that kind of professional understanding of our limitations. And also to add, as I said with my presentation, it's only China who bullies each other of us in the among the claimant states. They are being aggressive and provoking towards Bakamla in Natuna Islands. They have also been very aggressive in responding to the presence of Vietnam Coast Guard and also with the Philippine Coast Guard and MMEA. So if there's only one deviant behavior among the Coast Guards in the region, that would be the China Coast Guard. But among us, Southeast Asian countries who have the professional understanding and also knows how significant our roles is in maritime governance and also in maintaining this maritime order, that is not a problem that will come across between Southeast Asian Coast Guard organizations.
Thank you very much, Dr. J, for setting the stage for exciting presentations from our other three speakers. May I invite the audience perhaps to give a round of applause to Dr. J. But before that, I think we have just one last question from the floor. Please.
Well, I'm a Senior Colonel Zhou, retired from China. In all your speech, what do you want to say? Basically, I can anticipate. It's not a surprise to me, but it is surprising to me to see how you portray China as a devil in the region, while yourself look almost like an angel. But let me ask you a question that I talked yesterday. In 2000 and 2013, Filipino Coast Guard killed Chinese fishermen from Hainan Island and from Taiwan. Why were you so barbaric to kill Chinese fishermen? And why a country that is never stronger militarily than China could behave so barbarically against the innocent Chinese fishermen? And is it because that you believe these fishermen are so innocent, so can do anything against them? And is it because the Chinese policy toward you at that time was so tolerant that we did nothing against you, so you could do that? So is it something that China should reflect to extend that we have to increase our presence with a stronger Coast Guard? Please tell me frankly.
I'll be very frank in responding to your question. Thank you for using the word barbaric. Coast Guards in the region, not just the Philippine Coast Guard, is not a barbaric. You were mentioning about the shooting incident in Taiwan in 2013 and also a maritime incident that happened between the Philippine Navy and Vietnam. All of this were already diplomatically settled now. We now have established a good relationship with Taiwan and also with Vietnam. But here's the thing now. Among the countries in the region, we all have a positive diplomatic relationships in discussing the South China Sea. And all of these countries have issues with the China Coast Guard and the Chinese Maritime Militia pretending to be Chinese fishing vessels. You keep on mentioning the word barbarism. But as I said, we abide with the international rules-based order. With the images and videos that we have already presented to the international community, in which I know that the People's Republic of China is not really pleased. We have portrayed the word that you are saying, but I'm not going to use that against you. I think the transparency initiative that we have been espousing for the past months is a clear understanding of what the word barbarism is. Because Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Philippines will always abide with the international rules-based order. I just don't know whether People's Republic of China is also willing to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think let's give a round of applause to Dr. J before he signs off. Thank you. Our next speaker today is Vice Admiral Tatsuhiko Takashima. You have the floor, sir.
Legend implies that the presence of the Coast Guard vessels might have the negative impact on the peace of South China Sea. The concern is very right. Coast Guard's prior mission is law enforcement. As a water East China Sea, there is a territorial disagreement among the countries surrounding South China Sea. So, the two or more forces have to face the issue of what law is enforced, or who enforces the law. The answer is very clear for each Coast Guard. Our law should be, or we will. This overlap with different authorities creates the gray zone by white vessels. Coast Guard herself alone could not solve this issue. Situation differs case by case. One country might control some islands and control the sea as their territorial water. In this case, other might try to prevent the law enforcement of this country, or the situation even. Both sides try to enforce the law. In most cases, Coast Guard are at the front line. And in general, try not to escalate the situation, but also may try to get better position if possible. Then there is a risk that the Coast Guard's activity adds to South China's instability, which should not be happen, hopefully. Fortunately, if my understanding of international law is correct, government vessels are not under the jurisdiction of other countries in normal situation. There is a favorable safeguard system of White House confrontation, while international law allows Greyhound to feel sovereignty against the others as self-defense. Then they do not deteriorate the situation automatically, and the status quo exists, if not stably. Confrontation is not a good situation, but Coast Guard's confrontation is far better than Navy confrontation. In addition, the rule freedom of navigation exists at sea. Unlike the rules of the ground and the air, even in territorial water, every vessel has the right of innocent passage. These rules help not to escalate the situation and create the room for coexistence at sea. However, it also means that the very controlled risky situation continues. So we have to do something more to prevent bad things to happen. But on this occasion, I would like to praise the professionals of the Coast Guards in this region, including in Chinese Coast Guards. Then what Coast Guards and other participants can do to stabilize, control, or at least maintain the situation? I think there are two types of scenarios to worsen the situation. The first one is intentional deteriorations. Based on one side's authorized decision, our forces act further to gain more control of the situation. It includes more aggressive operation against the other forces, like threatening, slamming, and finally, the use of force. Gray goes darker, what turns black. Second one is unintentional. Active facing Coast Guards accidentally deteriorate the situation. This varies. Misperception, misunderstanding, disbelief, personal motivations, fears, or poor skills, etc., cause the situation. And because the aggressive action should be based on the decision of leaders or policymakers, the first case is serious but simple. and mostly controlled by diplomacy and deterred or finalized by navies, while the Coast Guards have some roles. And if the deterioration, decision, or intention to go further has a limited goal, the accidental escalation should be handled like the second case, unintentional one. So I start with the second. Eliminating risk of escalation is not easy. Actually, many conflicts and wars started accidentally, and the continuing escalation increases the risk. However, accidents also have backgrounds, like misperception, misunderstanding, fears, vanity, personal motivations. I listed it before. I believe there are ways to lower the risk. The simplest and unilateral way is to improve the professionalism of the forces. Creating the crisis by themselves is a shame for the forces. Professional soldiers do not act by their personal motivations, and they know how to act in the deteriorated situation. Commanders of trained forces control the action of the crews well and lower the risk of misbehavior. Then they also know the damage control, which is the action to limit the impact of misbehavior. The weak point of this way is that this is a long way, almost without goal. There were some mishandled cases, even with the modern navies. For example, Korean Navy used fire control radar systems, the Japanese P-1, 5 years ago at open water of the Sea of Japan, which is normally considered as an initiation of attack and controlled tightly by rule of engagement, and increase the tension between Japan and Korea. So other ways are needed in addition. Mistrust and misunderstanding were often developed between strangers, same as fears to the people on board the conflicting vessels. Each Coast Guard definitely carries different national interests, but the officers and the crews are mostly gentlemen and not violent criminals willing to harm others. So any chance to know each other helps to mitigate the uncontrolled situation. Sometimes bilateral event might be difficult to have because of deteriorations. Then utilizing a multilateral event like this symposium could help. Events like fleet review give chances to a larger number of people to interact. Then the experience spread among the guards. Bilateral or multilateral event exercises are better because they also give a chance to experience and improve practical communication skills among Coast Guards. It also established communication protocol, which is indispensable for preventing escalation. Lines of communication are important for each level of commands to discuss situation. The way of communication at each level should be agreed and practiced. The needs is higher when the duration is worse. These exercises should not be limited of law enforcement. Search and rescue exercises, which are often pursued between unfriendly navies at the start of the situations. Cooperation in the areas also helps. Anti-piracy, anti-drug, and smuggling are the example of areas which intrinsically requires international cooperation. Country, Japan, China naval relations is not good enough to do a bilateral exercise in Asia. But they maintain the cooperation in the Gulf of Aden for anti-piracy operations. Coast Guards are in better position to keep these kinds of relations. While motivation comes from the negative situation, these cooperation and exercise help to enhance the stability of the area. Finally, the quality of cooperation is not as important for this aim, but the chance to communicate. Desirably face-to-face is. Participation of the Great Hulls Navy, if properly controlled, mitigate the tensions at the confronting area. When the Coast Guard alone facing the area, every responsibility on their shoulders. If she loses, then the country loses. If she gains, her country gains. This situation increases tension at the sea and gives stress or sometimes motivation factors to do the unreasonable behavior. In this situation, the result of Coast Guard action does not create the final output because the Navy is the force that is designed to interface between countries and has the physical power to change the result of Coast Guard's conflict. Then the burden, tension, and the motivation for aggressive behavior at sea decreases. This helps Coast Guard to do the delicate operation, maintain the posture to enforce the law, but to not escalate the situation. Some might care about the new unstableness created by the new members. However, I believe total result could be positive if the deployment of the Navy is well designed. The Navy's mission is mostly just being, no, I skipped that way. Then how to handle the risk of the first scenario? Needless to say, the best solution is to reach the peaceful agreement through diplomatic negotiation. South China Sea has become busier commercially, and the countries are more and more interdependent. The cost of aggressive actions became higher. Second best is to get judgment based on the international law, namely using International Court of Justice or Permanent Court of Arbitration. Japan accepted the compulsory jurisdiction in 1958. But in China, South China Sea, China even rejected judgment by the Permanent Court of Arbitration about arbitration as a waste, criticizing the judgment as a waste paper. So the presence of these courts will not help to solve these kinds of issues in the near future. The presence of the Navy, I mentioned before, not only mitigate the confrontation, but might deter the other side to do more aggressive behavior. Japanese Senkaku case is an example again. However, it requires some amount of power to deter, which is not easy to get against the big power country, while there's a big difference from no presence. Next option is to maintain the attitude to handle the situation multilaterally. The issue itself would be bilateral in many cases, and militarily stronger side might insist that the issue should be solved between them. However, how it will be solved or how they implement the international law in South China Sea is the interest of almost all the countries. Every country is the stakeholder to the way of the solving countries, and of course, and should against to change the existence condition by force. Alliance is one of the strong methods, but not available nor favorable for many countries. This multilateralism can be expressed through the diplomatic verbal expression. The physical action each country would vary. Some country only offers verbal support and criticism. Some with the possibility of economic or other actions. If more countries share the idea of this multilateralism and act consistently, the act of forcible exchange has less chance to occur. I think ASEAN countries are experts of these kind of framework, and I hope you manage the situation cooperatively and without crash one by one. Coast Guard operation is backed up by this multilateralism, and Coast Guard cooperation helps to develop this multilateralism and increase the credibility of consistent action. It strikes in the verbal expression with actual action to support the rule of law. I suggested that exercise and the cooperation mainly with the conflicting countries before, which is often difficult to agree. This time, exercise can be done with rather like-minded countries with less conflicting issues, while the scheme is open to others in order not to be seen as a coast military. Inclusion is better than exclusion for Coast Guard. White House relations sometimes have to oppose each other is originally cooperative. The law enforcement and the cooperation made the area better, safer, and more stable through stopping and deterring illegal actions. I stress the origin of their confrontation, but that is an exceptional situation. Navies, on the other hand, designed to fight other navies cooperating with other allied navies. Coast Guard should not least beneficial point. I see South China Sea situation is less stable than this East China Sea because of the more numbers of less powered and less cooperated participants. This might lead to stronger signs, more aggressive action, and less incentive for cooperation. So multilateral cooperation is more important in this area than the East. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for outlining, as you put it well, how to prevent bad things from happening, how to manage and lower risk. Now may I invite to the floor Captain Bakamla Udia Shah. Ya, terima kasih.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A very good morning to all of us. First of all, I would like to extend our appreciation to the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam for their invitation to Indonesia Coast Guard or Bakamla to attend this important forum to speak about the South China Sea South China Sea issues. But for us, in Southeast Asia, the issues is not only South China Sea. We have a lot of issues as well in maritime security. So my presentation the theme of my presentation will be Coast Guard diplomacy in Southeast Asia, which also include what we do to enhance the stability and security in surrounding waters of Southeast Asia, including the South China Seas. So I would give a brief background of Southeast Asia and Indonesia maritime area. So for you guys to acknowledge how is the maritime security is very important for Indonesia. And then I would like to discuss a bit on defining what Coast Guard diplomacy is. Is it different with the diplomacy that we know? Then I will describe on Coast Guard forum that we have in the world and the objective of such forum. I will then also describe the Coast Guard cooperation in Southeast Asia. Then I will give some best practices of Coast Guard cooperation that we experience. And lastly, I will give a conclusion on it. So Southeast Asia region is an important region for maritime activities. We consider the region as a maritime continent. The region is rich in natural resources, whether living or non-living resources such as mineral, oil, gas, and everything. With the population almost 700 million, the region is a prospective market for international trade. The geographical position of Southeast Asia itself itself has become geopolitical gravity for Indo-Pacific, where the maritime routes in the region is considered as one of the important maritime routes for global seaborne trade and also strategic maritime activities. As for Indonesia, we are one of the archipelagic states in the Southeast Asia. The other one is the Philippines. That borders with 10 countries in the regions. Almost 40% of global seaborne trade in the world passes through Malacca Strait, and 1/3 of it of a global trade passes through the South China Sea. With this geographical advantage and abundant natural resources has put maritime sector to become important aspect of our economy. Our maritime area has been the maritime routes for ages, since it's connected with 2 great continents and 2 great oceans. We could all see with the maritime traffic density maps that I provide in the slide, how dense the traffic in the Southeast Asia. Based on our data itself, in Indonesia alone, there were around 5,000 to 7,000 ships transiting Indonesian waters every day. With that strategic geographical position and the abundance of both living and natural resources in our maritime area, our president, since 2014, has declared a vision for Indonesia to become world maritime fulcrum. This vision consists of 5 pillars, which is rebuilding our maritime culture, safeguarding and optimizing our maritime resources, building our maritime infrastructure and connectivity, maritime diplomacy, and building our maritime defenses. Unfortunately, to realize that vision, a maritime area in Indonesia are prone to all sorts of maritime security threats, such as drug trafficking, IUU fishing, irregular migration, marine pollution, border dispute, sea robbery, and etc. That's why I said not all for us. The dispute on the South China Sea is not the only thing. We have a lot of homework in Indonesia. Considering maritime threats, we consider maritime threats is very transnational in nature. That's why countries in the region, I think, faces the same challenges that we face as well. That is why cooperation and collaboration among maritime law enforcement agencies is very important to prevent and tackle common issues of maritime security in our region. So we've seen in the last 10 to 20 years back, the Coast Guard in Southeast Asia has played an important role for their respective countries to safeguard their respective maritime areas from all sorts of maritime security threats. Although not every countries in the region have Coast Guard, but they have an agencies that conduct Coast Guard functions. In general, Coast Guard main roles are search and rescue, law enforcement, maritime safety, border security, and marine environmental protection. It's been said by the Vice Admiral and also with our colleague from the Philippine Coast Guard. But also Coast Guard commonly is as a reserve component for the Navy in the event of armed conflict. So because more and more countries establish and develop their Coast Guard, and the reason is because the countries they prefer to deploy the so-called white hole vessel to enforce sovereignty and their sovereign rights. Now we are trying to define how we define the Coast Guard diplomacy, and we think because the Coast Guard present in the area of common concern or conflicting area are sought to be more gentle to compared to the Navy or Grey Hull vessel. Since the Coast Guard is a non-military force, and also they what you call it, their function is only to defend their sovereign rights and sovereign and maritime law. In regards of enforcing sovereignty and jurisdictional rights, Coast Guard approach is based on legal approach. Coast Guard is also considered as peace and humanitarian forces, since one of the main function of Coast Guard is giving assistance to vessels that are in distress. Lastly, Coast Guard always put forward a cooperative approach in doing their function and duties, whether with other government agencies within their countries, with other Coast Guard, and thus also the society. Okay. Oh, so far. Okay. Sorry. I think I pressed too many. Okay. Yes. So how we define Coast Guard diplomacy? To answer this question, I think we need to consider several questions which could help us to define Coast Guard diplomacy itself. First question is what Coast Guard diplomacy? Is it different with diplomacy that widely known that are usually done by the diplomats or the Navy? And why does Coast Guard need to play a role in diplomacy? Next is to what extent that Coast Guard diplomacy could give impact to regional stability, considering Coast Guard main roles traditionally are heavily in enforcing national law, in protecting their sovereign rights. And last question, in what form or ways that Coast Guard diplomacy could be implemented? This is the questions that we need to ask ourselves, the Coast Guard, how far that we can, involve with the diplomacy itself. Well, since Coast Guard always put themselves to handle their maritime issues collaboratively, and because maritime security issues mainly is very transnational in nature, they form a lot of the forums within the region. So this is the Coast Guard forum that we have in the world. We have the Coast Guard Global Summit, we have the HACGAM, North Atlantic and Pacific Coast Guard Forums, European Coast Guard Forum, up until the Arctic Coast Guard Forum. So in Southeast Asia, the cooperation among Coast Guard and maritime law enforcement agencies has grown rapidly. In the past couple of years, Indonesia Coast Guard itself has a robust cooperation with our neighboring Coast Guard agencies. Bilaterally, Indonesia Coast Guard have formal cooperation with the Philippine Coast Guard, Vietnam Coast Guard, Malaysia Coast Guard, and the Singapore Police Coast Guard. Regionally, the Coast Guard in Southeast Asia has engaged with ASEAN-led mechanism concerning maritime security cooperation. Forums such as ASEAN Regional Forum, ASEAN Maritime Forum, and other forum has continued to be a medium for cooperation and confidence building among Coast Guard and maritime law enforcement agencies. The form of cooperation that Coast Guard have, beside the regular meeting, it also comprises of information sharing cooperation, capacity building, such as joint exercise and training, and also coordinated patrol. So regarding bilateral cooperation, we have conducted, I think since 7 years ago, bilateral cooperation with a coordinated patrol with Malaysia under the name of Patkor Optima. It's between Bakamla and MMEA, and also other agencies that are coordinated by Bakamla in Indonesia. And it has been very successful. We right now has planned to conduct several similar coordinated patrol with the Philippine Coast Guard. Beside the ASEAN countries, we also have a coordinated patrol with the Australian Border Force, which we call the Gannet operation every year. We also conducted several port visits to Johor, Malaysia, Singapore, and Darwin last year. And next month, it's already been arranged that Bakamla will have a port visit to the Philippine Coast Guard. The purpose of this port visit is to enhance collaboration and confidence between the agencies. Besides the regional Southeast Asia Coast Guard cooperation, we also have a robust cooperation with Coast Guard outside the region. We have the MOUs with the Australian Border Force, with Japan Coast Guard, US Coast Guard, Korean Coast Guard, and others. Actually, we also already have a discussion with China Coast Guard, but hasn't been any movement of the discussion. We also an active member of HAPGAM and Coast Guard Global Summit. And the cooperation mainly is to improve our confidence and also the capacity and capabilities of the Coast Guard itself. So in that sense, we conduct several capacity building activities, such as Regional Maritime Security Desktop Exercise, capacity building program for HAGAM, and PBSS training in our PBSS Training Center in Batam, which engaging all the Coast Guard in Southeast Asia. I think this is going to be the next two slides. So sorry if I'm going to be exceeded my time, but I'm going to talk about the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum. Since 2014, Coast Guard and maritime law enforcement agencies in ASEAN have discussed the formation of ASEAN Coast Guard Forum as the platform for maritime security and safety cooperation in ASEAN. Well, up until November 2022, the first ASEAN Coast Guard Forum meeting was convened in Bali, Indonesia. And this year, we also convened the second ASEAN Coast Guard Forum in Jakarta. The meeting produces a declaration and joint statement that highlight the importance of cooperation and collaboration among Coast Guard and maritime law enforcement agencies in ASEAN to tackle maritime security issues such of common concern. It was agreed that this forum will be continued up until 2025, and we hope that it will continue further in the future. The meeting is not also agreed to conduct collaborative activities such as information sharing. I put to there in the picture that this is what we do every month with the Coast Guard in Southeast Asia. We share our information, what's happening in our countries and the region, so that we in the future we have the maritime regional maritime domain awareness. And this is the best practices that we have. One of the examples of good relation and cooperation between Coast Guard is that we experienced in last July in regards of apprehension of the motor tanker Arman. The super tankers was transshipping oil in our EEZ, where in the process they also dump and discharge the waste in our EEZ, which actually it breaches our laws. When we approached the vessel, they ran away toward Malaysia EEZ, and it was really hard for us to conduct VBSS because this is a very super tanker, and our patrol ship is just not super patrol ships. On that crucial moment, we contacted MMEA and informed them that we conduct a hot pursuit in order to apprehend the ship. We also requested MMEA to assist us, and the MMEA responded very fast with sending their helicopter and their special response team. After MMEA took control of the ships, they hand over the ships and send us for further investigation process. This is the form of great cooperation among Coast Guard that we can show to you that, how important the Coast Guard cooperation in the region. This relation and trust was not built instantly, but it's built by a lot of communication and a lot of meetings. So I think this trust and confidence between Coast Guard in the region is very high right now. Another best practice on that we had is on the cooperation and collaboration between Indonesia and Malaysia regarding the MOU common guidelines concerning treatment of fishermen in unresolved maritime area. This MOU was signed in 2012 with the purpose of enhancing cooperation among maritime agencies of Indonesia and Malaysia. Does also give a better treatment to the fishermen from both countries who are carrying out fishing activities in unresolved maritime area. Bakamla and MMEA has been carried out the repatriation of fishermen that were fishing in unresolved area, or the traditional fishermen that accidentally entered the maritime areas of either Malaysia and Indonesia. And I think this MOU has become been what you call it become an issue that been researched by several academics. So I would like to summarize my presentation for conclusion. First, maritime security issues is a very transnational in nature. Collaboration among countries is very important. Second, Coast Guard plays an important role in resolving maritime dispute, since Coast Guard is considered more stabilizing forces. Third, enhancement of bilateral and regional cooperation among Coast Guard and maritime law enforcement in Southeast Asia is very important. And lastly, we think that ASEAN Coast Guard Forum establishment will play a very great role for peace, secure, and stability in Southeast Asia. I will end my presentation there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak, for excellent presentation on Coast Guard diplomacy, how the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum plays a real practical role in building trust and finding areas in which countries within ASEAN can cooperate and hopefully set standards in terms of how this can be taken forward beyond ASEAN, within Southeast Asia, including into South China Sea. I now give the floor to our final speaker from Vietnam, Senior Colonel Nguyen Kak Wood. But the floor is yours.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to sincerely thank the Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam for inviting me to attend and give a presentation at the conference. The 15th South China Sea International Conference with the theme "Illuminate the Gray, Light Up the Green." Yesterday, there were many presentations with valuable solutions were put forward to illuminate the gray. Today, we will discuss to find solutions to light up the green. There has been three of my colleagues in the country in the region who gave very detailed and valuable presentation. To continue, I would like to present the topic: improve the effectiveness of cooperation in crime and IUU prevention among Coast Guard of the country in South China Sea. My presentation already overlapped with the Bakamla and so it's something we have to acknowledge that. So in terms of the background of the South China Sea, we can conclude that the cooperation to ensure safe and secure the sea in the South China Sea are very important, not only for South China Sea country itself, but also for entire region and the world. For measurement for international cooperation, we already mentioned. If we look here, we see a lot of initiative had post for global to regional. Now we focus on sub-regional. That ASEAN Coast Guard Forum, that's one of my colleagues already mentioned. That we are now is can I elaborate more detail for the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum? That initiative proposal at ASEAN Regional Forum held in 2014 in Da Nang, the Vietnam on the building of cooperation mechanism between the Coast Guard of ASEAN country. We had two expert level that discussed in Philippines, and we promote one in the more detail, that the term of the reference, how to organize and implement of the function and the cooperation mechanism for the Coast Guard to actual cooperation in the ground. In terms of bilateral, the Vietnam Coast Guard almost had agreement with the anti-region, including for some the external like the U.S. Coast Guard, Japan Coast Guard, and the Indian Coast Guard. To the bilateral and the multilateral, the Japan Coast Guard sent the ship to pay visit to Vietnam. The Indian Coast Guard pay visit to Vietnam. A Chinese Coast Guard pay visit to Vietnam, and also the Japan also and Vietnam already send the Coast Guard to the outside the border. We already visit and do the exercise with the Indian Coast Guard in the Chennai, with Thai in Japan, in Yokohama and Touch is in Kobe. And next week we're going to hold for the Korean Coast Guard to pay a visit to Haiphong, and we do exercise, communication, and also for search and rescue. And with some the typical case of the Coast Guard and how the cooperation we can enhance prevent transnational crime. On the November 2012, we had to suspect a vessel located in the Vietnamese water that we had to receive information from the other regional country such as Malaysia and recap IFC by in Singapore. So at that time, there's some capacity that through all the rule of that vessel into the sea. So we rescue that people, and with the help of the crew of that vessel, so we can locate the suspect vessel is maybe they had been. So we send the ship, and with the identification, and also we put the people on the boats so they can recognize exactly the vessel, so we can handle it. Because at that time they change the name, they paint the IMO, the differency, so sometimes had to confuse with the in terms of the rule of engagement and the rule of the ship visit of foreign ship. So when we know exactly, we can successfully that because time reporting and focal point sharing and inter-government cooperation and quick action by authority. So that's very successful case in Rapida in 2012. Another case is Occam Harmony on June 2015. The spot of Malaysian tanker Occam Harmony passing 10 robbers approached the rear of the boat with the canoe using the bamboo stick with iron hook to climb onto the ship. They use the gun and knife to fork the sailor and to take him to the captain's room to restrain of the captain and control 22 crew members and stolen all the sailor belongings. Then they destroy and through satellite navigation equipment and communication into the sea. So June 18, 2015, Malaysian maritime law enforcement were spot and pursue. At the time, Malaysian maritime law enforcement contact to Vietnam's Coast Guard, exceptionally for me at the time, the point of contact, because at that time I'm director for international corporation of Vietnam Coast Guard. So we report for the higher authority and send the vessel to the patrol that for the request of Malaysian Maritime Law Enforcement. Took the advantage of the Danish robber lowering the lifeboats on the occupied Harmony to escape and maneuver to the Thổ Island of Vietnam to hide. Vietnam Coast Guard after that caught the pirates and sent the photo of the boats that and the people that they used to escape and sent to the MMEA for ratification. When the MMEA confirmed that the boat belonging to hijacked vessel, and that person was the one who hijacked the Orchid Harmony, so Vietnam Coast Guard that kept and hand over to Vietnam Ministry of Public Security to detain and investigation. And MMEA sent the delegation to provide more information and evidence of the accident in the February 2016. The Malaysian government requested Vietnam to allow a transaction of Indonesian pirates to Malaysian for trial. After 18-month detention and investigation in Vietnam, in November 2016, Vietnam handed over 8 people to Malaysian authority for trial. Malaysian courts hand down the bandit strict sentence ranging 15 years to 18 years in prison. The lesson is time reporting by the owner. The focal point shall we recap intergovernment cooperation and cooperation action in the graph. That's the key. And the other key is the IUU key. IUU fishing in the Southeast Asia is alarming. That the sheer damage for the maritime economy and also for the effect to environmental. So therefore, some is a very overlap. We don't know exactly. It's actually happened in what the water belong. So we hopefully we can hand over at sea for some Bacamla already hand over for Vietnam, or the Vietnam and the Chinese also took the ship and sent over. And when the back the country, we can further investigation and punishment is the better way without the tension of diplomatic, still ensure the violence will be handled in accordance by the law. Existing cooperation mechanism in South China Sea in general and South China in particular have effectively in capacity building, information sharing, and coordination in handling incidents arising at sea. However, some measures do not yet involve the full participant of the country. For example, for the recap, we had not that friend here from Indonesia and Malaysia are not full member. And some of recommendations already mentioned by my friend. We had a proposal that the Maritime Law Enforcement Agency should provide the hotline or direct, for example, telephone, email, communication channel, so that ships operating at sea can continue directly when they encountering incident. And the Maritime Law Enforcement Agency in adjacent and opposite quota countries shall strengthen cooperation in patrol and handling the violent vessel. And with the support of the government, we hopefully the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum, we officially establish and in real practice. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, Senior Colonel. We have had 4 excellent presentations from the ground, the Coast Guard right on the front line. And we have heard the broader stresses that they face, but also the mechanisms that they have put in place for practical cooperation on common challenges, whether piracy or IIU. And now it's left to me to open the floor to questions. We've got about 20 minutes. I will take 3 questions at a time, perhaps 2 live questions and 1 from the online participants. First, starting with the ma'am. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. My name is Shana from the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in Vietnam, and we would like to offer some clarifications as well as comments regarding something that was mentioned in the previous Q&A session. So in 2013, there was an unfortunate accident involving a Taiwanese fishing vessel and the Philippine Coast Guard that unfortunately resulted in the loss of life for 1 Taiwanese fisherman. However, as Dr. J has already mentioned, so this accident has been resolved through government-to-government channels between Taiwan and Philippines in a way that has been deemed satisfactory by both sides. And furthermore, Taiwan and the Philippines have used this tragic accident to create an impetus for a constructive cooperation between the Coast Guard of both sides that continues to this day. So we want to use this to illustrate that the longstanding position of Taiwan on South China Sea, which is that we support the peaceful resolution of all the disputes. And even in cases where the differences cannot be solved right away, we believe that we can settle them aside to find constructive ways to move forward together. And we hope to offer this as food for thought. And we would also like to ask panelists a question, which is, we've been talking about regional cooperation between the Coast Guards, and what do they think about the force of non-ASEAN or non-Southeast Asian Coast Guard, for example, Japan, for example, Australia, as a force for creating more security and stability in the region? Thank you.
Thank you. So the question is the roles for non-ASEAN countries in some of the Coast Guard cooperation taking place. The second question is Ambassador Vin.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. The question of the topic of this section is very much important, especially in terms of a lot of examples of best practices and cooperation. And at the same time, we hear points of views on how the Coast Guard has been used in different way in what we can term as razor tactics. So my question here is that we have a lot of examples for practices and cooperation within Southeast Asia and Southeast Asia with other countries, but how we can promote further the engagement between ASEAN and China through the different channels and mechanisms of ASEAN, including ASEAN-China dialogue, putting them in the context of building confidence, especially through the implementation of the DOC and also promoting the negotiations on the COC. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll take 1 final question before I let the floor answer. Thank you. Go ahead.
Question for myself. I'm David from the Australian Department of Defence. My question is directed towards both Captain Hudiantia and the good Senior Colonel. How has Coast Guard cooperation changed since Indonesia and Vietnam announced their maritime border delimitation agreement at the start of this year? And how do you see it? How do you see cooperation progressing into the future? Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll take 1 question from the online participants, which also overlaps with some of the questions that have been raised already. Can Coast Guard cooperation be promoted beyond the South China Sea? For example, connecting ASEAN with the Pacific Islands to jointly handle priority issues such as climate, IIU, piracy. Perhaps I will start by letting our panelists address these questions, starting with perhaps Bapak. Perhaps you can start with the questions that were raised. Yes.
Okay, try to answer the question from Shana from Taiwan. What roles for non-ASEAN Coast Guard to cooperate? Well, actually, like I mentioned in my presentation, we do have a lot of cooperation with non-ASEAN Coast Guard as well. We have a great cooperation with the US Coast Guard, which they also assist us to build our new training center in Batam. And with Japan Coast Guard, we already have this commitment that they're going to grant patrol vessels to Indonesia. So a range of cooperation with non-ASEAN Coast Guard, we do have we do have it. But in terms of ASEAN Coast Guard cooperation itself, the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum, we try to make it at first we try to make it exclusive in ASEAN first. Then after it formally established, we going to what you call it? We going to move with the ASEAN mechanism itself. You know, the ASEAN have the ASEAN Plus mechanism. We're going to engage with all of the ASEAN Plus countries to cooperate with the ASEAN Coast Guard itself, such as building programs and everything, especially for capacity building. I'm sorry, the ambassador, I didn't write your name. You are asking about how we could promote further between ASEAN and China in South China Seas dispute. Well, for Indonesia, for Batam, we don't actually the Coast Guard. We don't what you call it. We are promoting cooperation with every countries. I remember when I was in international division, I also engaged the talk with the China Coast Guard, but as for now, I think the communication has been very limited. Last year in Vietnam, when the head of Batam, the head of the Indonesian Coast Guard, went to the first Vietnam Coast Guard and Friends events here, Batam have a meeting with the China Coast Guard, and we talk about how we can improve our cooperation in the future. But as for now, I asked my colleagues in international relations that there has been no talk anymore after the meeting. So in that sense, we are open to all the sort of cooperation that the purpose of it, we want to have this the situation in the field is become more steady and more stabilized. Last for David, I thought you were going to ask me with Indonesian because yesterday you were speaking Indonesian better than me. So how it changed? I think there has not been change because the cooperation between Indonesian Coast Guard and the Vietnamese Coast Guard is already very strong. I remember with Captain, we when in 2017 when we had our LOE, it's just like the process is very fast because we know that we need each other to tackle the issues that we are facing. As for now, I think the cooperation between Bakamla and Vietnam Coast Guard is still the same and even stronger. And we hope that with the finalization of our EEZ agreement, we just hope that person beside you from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs give us more direction on how we could improve and even go further with our cooperation. I think with Vietnam Coast Guard, every trainings that we invite, the Vietnam Coast Guard always came to the training. Every invitation that the Vietnam asked us, we also come to the invitation. And next year, I think we already plan to also have a port visit to the Vietnam. So I think those cooperation is still the same because we do want to have a strong cooperation with Coast Guard in the region. And last question, can Coast Guard be promoted beyond South China Sea? Yes, it can. I mean, like ASEAN, all of the ASEAN Coast Guard also a member of HAGAM and also a member of the Coast Guard Global Summit. And we also conduct cooperation with, I think, like my senior colonel colleague said, that the Vietnam Coast Guard had cooperation with the U.S. Coast Guard. We have cooperation with the Indian Coast Guard. We do have the same cooperation as well. So that in the in the sense of the issues, I think we are agreed that the issues that you put in the question are our issues. So it means that to tackle those issues, we are really open to the all of sort of cooperation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Senior Colonel Nguyen.
I could elaborate some more the idea about the cooperation between the Vietnam and Indonesia. We know that Vietnam government and Indonesian government have already decided delimitation of the EEZ. Therefore, now have to two lines, one for continental shelf and the one line for the EEZ. Therefore, we with the normal status of in terms of the maritime region is some differences. So we hopefully we cooperate in the joint pattern in terms of the overlapping to control a certain time to eliminate the tension between maybe the innocent something there, because that's what we are thinking about it. And with the grow up of the Indonesian Coast Guard, that become and we think in the future we are better understand and the better cooperation. And in terms of the extra for the country in the ASEAN, we have to already had the global, already had the regional, but we think the bigger is it's not necessarily the better, because something is we difficult to manage, because when the smaller is we are more agree about that. And we already discussed about how the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum can operate, because if we have to normal way of ASEAN way, that we need we had to veto. That cannot happen for the ASEAN Coast Guard Forum, because we intended is for majority or the 2/3 agree that we can do. That's the way we are discussing, because sometimes if we focus only the mechanism that the ASEAN rule set is difficult to cooperate, because one the hesitation which may be difficult to retain of the other countries. Hopefully we reach agreement with the majority of decision making in ASEAN Coast Guard Forum. And for the Taiwan is a very typical case here. We had a vessel to the water there, and they had a vessel also bilateral trade between the Vietnam and Taiwan. It's a Taiwan Chinese, so it's a very big, and a lot of the Vietnamese people now are working in the Taiwan. So therefore, maybe we not officially, because the diplomats not permitted, but in the crowd we can set some kind of cooperation in real to maintain the peace and security, because we hope that China and US understand the situation, because we cannot ignore the status quo of the Japan, the role in the maritime security in the Southeast Asia, in the South China Sea. It's frankly, it's my personal idea, but we think that the Chinese also support for that, because safety not for only Vietnam and Chinese, we are for the rest of the world and the entire region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senior Colonel. Vice Admiral, may I give you the floor next to address some of these questions?
Actually, I'm not a Coast Guard guy, but I would like to touch about something about cooperation of Coast Guard. This says that it can be a more cooperation outside South China Sea. Probably the question to Japan is, can you cooperate outside East China Sea? I think it's not so easy because the Coast Guard task is very busy, even peacetime, because their mission is enforcement, peace, stability in the region. So the answer to the question is yes and no. One part is yes, there can be made a cooperation in a bigger framework, but I think it will be going to be a very symbolic. For example, Japanese Coast Guard is very busy in handling the issues close to Japan, and they're more stressed. They're stressed in the capacity building in Southeast Asian countries because they themselves are not enough resource to participate. I don't think they operate or do missions in South China Sea in a practical manner. Actually, at least I'm a little bit frustrated about their participation. I have a question. Why they are not here? He's not here. I'm from navies and actually my son out there, but I have to talk about the security Coast Guard issues in here. I think Japanese Coast Guard should be more aggressive in participating in this kind of conference. And I think there is another question about Coast Guards can be do more to establish, maintain peace or establish, solve the issue. On my presentation, I said Coast Guard can't solve the issue. They're just maintaining and with not escalating issue. It's the mission for diplomacy. Probably there are many diplomats in this area. Coast Guards can't solve the sovereignty issue or territory issue by themselves. I think the stress in my presentation is one thing I stress in my presentation is you put too much burden on Coast Guard. You have to lessen the burden. They're not the institution to carry so much responsibility. You have to lessen. The Coast Guard's presence is good. It's better the presentation than the presentation of navies, but it doesn't mean they have to carry all the burden. So please don't expect too much on Coast Guards. So
Thank you very much. Perhaps I can give the floor just to one or two last questions if there's a burning question to be asked. Well, I don't see any. Well, then it just leaves me to thank our presenters. I think they have done an excellent job in terms of giving us not just scoping the issue, but raising very, very important questions that we all need to address. And on that score, I must congratulate the DAV for convening this particular forum and bringing together the practitioners, the people on the ground that face the pressures of the ever-evolving stress points in the waters in the maritime domain. So it just leaves me to thank the presenters, thank the DAV, and thank all of y'all. Can we give them a round of applause? Thank you.
Well, thank you, ambassadors and our distinguished speakers. So now we're going to take a 15-minute coffee break. There's coffee and snacks outside. And also waiting for you outside is the QR code to scan for the post-conference survey. So please scan the QR code and please take a few minutes of your time to do the survey because your feedback and evaluations and recommendations, suggestions, so on and so forth is very valuable to us and also one of the motivations to keep us going. Thank you so much. See you in 15 minutes.